Hello and welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And we're back. We've had a little bit of a shift. Life got in the way. Shit happens. We apologize, but whatever, we're here. We're going to do a little bit of a quick synopsis of what's coming up here, just to explain where we're at for like the next week here, in case you did not listen to our little mini bonus episode. But then we're going to talk about Seven Samurai, which we promised we'd talk about last week and then got pushed back to this week. So if you did skip our little mini bonus episode, what you need to know is that your Ni no Kuni bonus episode is coming out like probably tomorrow from when this goes live. So if you're a patron, go listen to that. Our special month that we never officially announced, we're going to kind of drop it on you, but unfortunately, scheduling kind of woobity up on us. We're gonna try Ume Boll, which is to say we're gonna watch Uwe Boll movies in May, but we also only might watch one Uwe Boll movie in May, depending on how we feel about it. It's a tentative plan.
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of those ideas that sounds wacky and fun and good on paper, which is why I think we can get at least one magnificent train wreck of a Uwe Boll episode. But depending on how that goes, we might decide like we have exhausted everything there is to say about Uwe Boll and go back to quarantine classics. So it's pretty up in the air. It's a real. It's gonna be heavily dependent on exactly how miserable watching Alone in the Dark is.
It truly is. But shout out to a friend of the podcast, Tom Desi, for the suggestion. Like in June of last year, we've had it on our notes for a while now. We thought it was brilliant back then. We're like, fuck it, we're gonna give it a shot. At the time, we had assumed that we'd be competing with other movies. May is the start of like summer blockbuster season. Joke's on us. We're in quarantine. So, Ume Boll it is.
Ume Boll. Here we go. But not this week. We're talking about a good movie this week.
Yeah, we're talking about an incredibly good movie this week. We're talking about Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. A movie that I really, really enjoyed. As someone who rather likes old cowboy movies, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and all that, I'd never realized that what they were missing to make them spectacular was, in fact, samurai. And now I know.
It's so funny, because despite being infamous as a giant weeb, I had never been as much into the samurai thing. But here we are. We're watching Seven Samurai, and it was absolutely wonderful. This is a movie, this is probably the highest praise I can give it. It is a movie that is 3.5 hours long, and I was enthralled for every second of it.
In full candidness, I watched about an hour and a half of it. Last week, life came up. I said, all right, I'm going to stop for right now because I have other things I need to do. I have my own life to take care of as well. Came back, finished it a little bit before we started recording. Wrapped the last 2.5 hours, which sounds like it'd be like, oh, I had to take a break in the middle of it. Not true. I easily could have sat through and watched this entire 3.5 hour movie in one go. It is absolutely wonderful. I had a great time with it.
Yeah, I guess in the interest of full disclosure as well, I had to go to dinner halfway through watching the movie, and I was actually annoyed that I had to stop and go to dinner. Like, I wanted to keep watching it. And then I came back and finished the whole thing and still had, like a whole hour and a half to go.
But the question is, did either of us time it with the intermission? Because I didn't know there was an intermission in here, so I absolutely did not.
I thought about it. I wanted to make sure that I had enough time when I got back to like finish it and do everything else. So I went past the intermission. They were unequal chunks. To say where I stopped would be spoilers, and you should watch this movie for yourself. So I probably stopped like 2/3 of the way through in my break.
Well, I think what we should talk about in pre-discussion for this movie, rather than, some of the other stuff that we've talked about in past quarantine classics, we're talking about, the how it relates to modern day and all that good stuff, is I really want to focus on the influence of this movie, because it is incredibly clear throughout a lot of different films. And I mean, the most obvious one is Magnificent Seven, which is just Seven Samurai with cowboys in pretty much every possible way. Bandits, they come, they raid a town in the western United States, and 7 cowboys come and, shoot them up, and some die, some live. Congrats, you have just 2 movies there.
Yeah, I think the influences here definitely really interesting to talk about. And I think that it's also really interesting being able to see those influences so clearly, and yet, like, that didn't detract from my viewing experience of the movie at all. In fact, it maybe only enhanced it, and then I'm like, this rules, and clearly George Lucas thought it ruled, too.
George Lucas is known for loving Akira Kurosawa, and I was not expecting so much, like, the influence to be so brazenly on display, and it is abundantly clear, like, holy shit. So, May the 4th, and now that I've said that this entire podcast does belong to Disney, just because they have said that if you tweet anything with hashtag May the 4th, it belongs to them, all that good shit. Twitter's a nightmare. Stay off Twitter.
Retweet.
So now that Disney owns this podcast, I can talk a little bit about what I did on May the 4th.
Disney already owned this podcast. Let's be real.
I forgot that you were a fucking paid shill. You with your fucking Disney stocks.
Thanks, Uncle Walt.
So on May the 4th, I, in my infinite wisdom, decided to watch a Star Wars movie. And you'll be happy to hear I did not watch the worst Star Wars movie, which is Episode 9. And I will put my foot down that Episode 9 is the worst Star Wars movie here.
I don't know if I can get behind that. When's the last time you watched Attack of the Clones?
I watched like half of Attack of the Clones like 6 months ago. Because I talked about it in one of our podcast episodes where I just, for no explicable reason, turned on Attack of the Clones and watched half of it.
Oh, that's right.
I did recently watch Attack of the Clones, or at least a good chunk of Attack of the Clones. I fell asleep through a chunk of it, which doesn't say much to the movie, but at least Attack of the Clones is coherent.
This is a debate for another time. Continue.
It really is. We shouldn't be talking. I mean, we are talking about Star Wars and talking about Akira Kurosawa, but So I watched Star Wars Episode 1, which hasn't aged super well. There's still parts of it that I really like. I think that the core of the movie, there's a really good idea to it. I like setting up like this rise to power for Palpatine. Once again, not what we're here to talk about. I just want to talk a little bit about my own Star Wars preferences, because of course I do. I'm a nerd with a podcast on the internet. What the fuck else do you expect me to talk about? So in light of that, I definitely saw a lot more influence of Akira Kurosawa on Lucas, just because, like, watching Seven Samurai and then the Star Wars movie that is so exquisitely George Lucas, both written and directed by him almost exclusively, you can really feel the influences. And a lot of it comes down to how the camera treats the whole film. Like, you can feel a lot of the writing in Star Wars as well, because a lot of it is very dry and more about ideas and thoughts rather than action, which is a lot of what Seven Samurai was in a lot of places. But also, the camera treats everything with a distance. Akira Kurosawa his shots aren't flat, but they're kind of flat adjacent, I suppose. Like, everything is very much like static. There's some pans, some tracking shots, but for the most part, it's just like the camera is not the story. The story is what's unfurling in front of you. And thankfully, there is enough happening in front of you that it makes, the movie still work. And I think like that flat camera angle works a lot in favor of Seven Samurai, allowing, the characters to really be who they are and tell the story that they want to tell, rather than focusing on like the action. And we'll get into how that plays into action as well in a little bit here. But that's not Star Wars. And so like the fact that they tried to use the same technique in Star Wars Episode 1, I think is what makes it in a lot of ways really boring, because a lot of it is very flat. like on the same level of everyone else. There's not like interesting angles anywhere. It's a lot of just static shots of people talking. You know, you'll get a group and it'll just like linger on them for a little bit, which is again interesting. And I think like if the movie was better in its core, it could actually be something. And like I enjoyed my rewatch of Star Wars Episode 1 despite it being bad, because I was so fascinated with the influences I saw of Kurosawa and like the ideas that were underlying it more than the actual content. Because as I said, the content is it's pretty bad, guys. But it was still fascinating, especially watching a Kurosawa film at the same time.
I think that like thinking about the dialogue, it's weird to think that George Lucas. I think part of it is just that George Lucas is kind of a weird dude, like when it comes to writing, who just doesn't like quite get like the subtleties of like writing dialogue and stuff. But I think a big part of that is just that like George Lucas may have fallen into a very common weeb trap when it comes to like people who try to be writers. And like I know I fell into this trap like early on in my career, is like people who grow up watching a lot of anime or playing a lot of video games just in general are really inspired by like Japanese cultural products, and like as intentionally or not, like emulating that kind of dialogue can often lead to disaster. That often leads to, you know, video game writing. And it's not because like Japanese writing is like Japanese dialogue writing is like bad. What it is just that like Japanese as a language just has so many like idiosyncrasies that like don't translate over, and that a lot of, in general, like I think this is also part of a cultural thing, that kind of like flatness, that sort of like reserved mentality that comes across in like the language too. And that like I noticed, like, you know, being a weeb, like studying a little bit of Japanese and like paying attention to what they're saying in the dialogue versus what they're saying in the subtitle. The subtitle would often be a very long, like, specific line of dialogue, and like the words they were saying would be a pretty like stock Japanese phrase, because there's so much that's left to like context and implication in a way that doesn't quite translate over here.
I was gonna say, I saw, I think Yoroshiku or something along those lines a lot. Like I'm referring to you because you are the person who knows Japanese, and I am someone who has watched a couple animes.
Well, I don't give the viewers the wrong idea. I do not know Japanese. I know a little bit of Japanese. I just wanted to clarify that.
You know more Japanese than I do. Let's put it that way. But I kind of took that to mean like, okay, good job. Like, it was one of those things that had a couple of varied meanings depending on like what the situation it was applied to was.
Yeah.
But like underneath it just be like Yoroshiku, and then they'd run away, and then like underneath it's like, you did well, thank you for your service. And I'm like, I mean, I don't know Japanese enough. Maybe there were multiple words in there that like just kind of bled together because I am a very bad language boy, as indicated by the fact that I took like 5 languages in college and didn't do very well at any of them. So like I could just be, you know, being dumb, but like a lot of times I'm like, okay, I know Yoroshiku is like a full thought, but like there's a lot more being expanded out underneath it.
Yeah, like there were definitely parts. It's not even that like in the context I'd say like the subtitles were inaccurate. It's just that like if you translated that literally, right? Like you use the same word, like in every instance that they use that like very common word or phrase, dialogue would get very repetitive and very boring very fast, like to an English ear. Like not so much but not so much in Japanese, because that's just the way the language works. So I found that pretty interesting in terms of, you know, part of the reason I wanted to watch this one is I've been wanting to watch more, you know, I'm a big old weeb. I want to watch more classic Japanese films that aren't fucking anime, so I can be a little more cultured. Just slightly more.
At that point, you have to give Jackson at least some credit above the average weeb, because like there's the weebs that are like, I have watched Naruto 6 times through, And then there's the weebs who are like, I understand the nuances of Japanese culture and am not just running around with my headband.
Can you imagine if when I go to Japan, I get off the plane like somehow without anyone noticing, like the whole ride I look normal, but like as soon as I step off and like my employers come to greet me, I'm wearing a fucking Naruto headband and like a full suit. Oh boy. But yeah, so like that was definitely an interesting element just from like a, you know, I'm a weeby nerd standpoint. But mostly like when Sean did this revelation about George Lucas, it was like, oh my god, like he really do be falling into that trap though. Like this is how George Lucas writes dialogue, is like transliterated like Japanese dialogue that doesn't work.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know like if there was an earlier version of Kurosawa's films that were more literal rather than the, you know, kind of Americanized extrapolation of dialogue that Lucas was watching at the time.
Yeah, possibly. I wonder. Well, especially because like even if you think about and Kurosawa's films are, I mean, this is influential enough that I imagine this got like a theatrical release at some point, kind of like Godzilla did. But you know, even with like, you know, the old days, like the anime fandom, when, you know, people weren't, if you wanted to watch a show that wasn't dubbed, you had to like go to a flea market and find someone's like fan subs they edited onto a VHS tape, and you know
it has the editor's note Keikaku means plan on it.
It has editor's note Keikaku means plan. Oh my god, there's some good fucking Dragon Ball Z fan sub memes that I won't go into here. But
are you sure? I spent a good chunk of change there just talking about Star Wars. And I'm not even the Star Wars guy on the podcast as much as you are. So I mean, you can feel free to just detour off there. Please do. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Maybe for another time. So I imagine that like even if because when Japanese films come over, like not so much anymore. Like now there are enough weebs who become upset if you do Americanize things too much, if you localize things too much. But like there tended to be, I feel like there are two extremes where you have the very literal kind of amateur like fan subs that like don't, you know, adapt the dialogue at all, so you get that kind of repetition, or you do what they did for the original Godzilla and most like anime dubs back in the 90s, which was, you know, change a lot of shit, edit the footage, add in, you know, Mr. White Reporter Man to be more relatable, giving narration about Godzilla. And so like I'm not familiar with this movie's like release history at all. I imagine that this is big and famous enough that it probably got both versions of that.
Note to Criterion Channel, who I've been watching a lot of your stuff on. I absolutely adore it. When you have supplementary material, please put more supplementary material on your stuff. I have been watching all of it whenever I watch a movie, and there was nothing on this one. I really wanted more.
That's kind of surprising because this is such like a ground zero like canon movie. That's so strange.
I'm willing to bet that probably on like the actual Criterion Collection DVD, there's a bunch more information.
Yeah.
Like I don't know the legal back end of all this stuff. There could be a bunch of reasons why there's not. So I'm just a greedy boy.
Yeah. I just want to scoop it all up. Yeah, I mean that makes sense, especially because like this is a Toho film. Like they probably still have the rights to it, I'm sure. Like whenever you're bringing a Japanese film over, it's such a legal nightmare because they have their own practices. So,
I mean, just look at JoJo. If you want to take that right there, and why that was in, you know, hell for 30 years or whatever.
Fascinating. I love multiculturalism. I love globalism. I live for this shit. All the Nazis can get fucked. Globalism is great.
I don't know what to add to that. I mean, fucking tweet. Do we want to talk spoilers now?
Let's talk spoilers. Let's go more because there is quite a bit I want to say about like the actual movie as well, because I did very, very much enjoy this. this.
Before we do, as always, my little mini ad break about the podcast. Follow us on Twitter at BDH_cast. Rate us on iTunes if you're enjoying the show. Tell friends if you're enjoying the show. That's the stuff that really, really helps. Next week, we're going to be talking about fucking... Are you afraid of the dark?
Alone in the Dark.
Alone in the Dark. Are You Afraid of the Dark is a Nickelodeon show. So yeah, we'll be talking about that next week. We'll see how that goes. I don't know. I think if nothing else, it's going to be a nice reprieve from this fucking heady bullshit we've been talking about for like 6 weeks now. So, as I said, I needed that from the get-go. I wasn't saying fuck enough. And like, this is a podcast where we say fuck.
Well, while we're still in chill mode, YouTube, my name, Jackson Keller. If you're watching it here, then give me that like, give me that comment, give me subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. You can fucking do it.
Spoilers.
You know what's not gross?
What's not gross?
Actually, no, what's very gross? The horrors of war.
Oh, that is true. That is true. The horrors of war are a fucking nightmare, and they are especially a nightmare when films try to portray them. Because I think before we get into what you're about to talk about, we should talk a little bit about how films work with the horrors of war.
Sure.
Because, like, I'm looking at Dunkirk, I'm looking at 1917, I'm looking at, you know, any sort of World War I, World War II movie where even in the glorification of the horrors of war, there's still a glorification of the glories of war as well. You know, like, I realize it's the glorification there twice, but like, I mean, that's the idea of it. You know, those movies are like, oh, war is so bad. Look at how fucking shitty the trenches were, and mustard gas is bad, and oh, we'll get those Nazis next time type of bullshit going on there. But like, at the end, still, it's kind of triumphant, and like, there's not really a downer note in a lot of those. And so like, even in its dirtiest, grittiest moments, there's still kind of an element of heroics to it. Not so much here, huh?
No, not so much. And I think that it's this movie's sort of weird and interesting because like I in some ways like it very much continues from the more like heady stuff we've been talking about, but in other ways this might be like perhaps even more so than Casablanca. This might be the most crowd pleasery movie we've watched for Quarantine Classics.
I mean, like it's out in the era of like cowboy movies as well, so like it is going to nab some crowd pleasing moments no matter what. Like, this feels like something that like the theater audiences at the time would have eaten up, and we would have complained about because, oh my god, they released another cowboy movie. What are they going to stop doing with this CCU, the Cowboy Cinematic Universe?
Yeah, right. And like I was even thinking about that, like, because there's a lot of like goofy humor in this movie, and like it's very much kind of a bro movie, like in a lot of ways.
I can see that, yeah.
Like I was thinking about this. In some ways, this is like the perfect intersection for me, and that like I love me a bro movie sometimes. Like I can get down to clown with that vibe, but I also like a little something to chew on. And I feel like this movie gives me that. There is enough of like the horrors of war and like, you know, some real solemn stuff, but a lot of the time it's just like a bunch of goofy boys teaching villagers how to defend themselves, like it's Mulan or something. Like, this whole movie is make a man out of you sequence for most of it.
And I mean, there is some kind of Mulan-esque influences in here too, honestly.
Well, Mulan probably took from this.
You know what I mean. I meant that I might have phrased that wrong, because that's definitely what I meant, but like, let's just pretend like I said something smart for once.
You told me to hold your feet to the coals, Sean. You've created your own monster.
Listen, I'm fine with that. You know what? You're right. Burn me alive.
But, so I think it's interesting in that, like, so much of this movie, it does have kind of a bro vibe, both in, like, the, yeah, dude, samurais are sick, and also just in, like, the more traditional sense of the word of just, like, genuine, like, male camaraderie. But also, so there's that, and like that element's pretty typical of war movies. But I think maybe it's just that, like, I think a big part of it is that it's not just the war element that's presented as like kind of grimy. The whole movie is pretty grimy. Like, these are almost like anytime you see peasants in like Game of Thrones, like that's the vibe that this movie has. That real emphasis on like being a peasant and being alive in general in this time period of like endless strife and like, you know, the guy with the biggest sword wins. Fucking miserable. Like that one of my favorite scenes, and I think we can jump off of something you were saying in the pre-discussion after this, Sean, because I think it goes along with it. That scene where like they capture one of the bandits who are the scouts, and like everyone in town, they're like, you know, the samurai are like holding them back, and they're like, like, you know, I'm gonna rip him apart, I'm gonna kill him. And he's like, no, like, this goes against our, like, he's defenseless, like, he's weaponless, like, we can't just gut him like a fish. And then the grandma who lost everything in these, like, bandit raids comes over with a hoe. And, like, they can't even look her in the eye as she goes to do it. Like, just that she was, like, moments ago just begging for death, that, like, she lost everything as a part of this, like, horrific violence. And, like, this small, like, act of petty revenge is like the only thing that's keeping her going. Shit's dark.
Yeah, man, that seems fucking rough.
So with the way that this movie, it's interesting because even more so than like a cowboy, like samurai are famous for like the Bushido code, you know, like they have their rules that they live by. And I think that like that in and of itself with kind of the glories of war, like you would think that would go hand in hand with this kind of movie.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of going into this, I was very much expecting like a cool, fun movie in that vein, because especially cowboy movies, there's not really a lot of, you know, dour notes to them. Even The Magnificent Seven, where there is kind of a downer ending, much like this movie, because I mean it is this movie just told with cowboys. Like it still kind of ends in a positive way in a lot of ways. It's not great, and even it's very they're not as gritty in this way. And so like I was expecting samurai movies to be a lot more fun, and like my idea of a samurai movie a lot of ways is reflective of like, this is gonna be a goofy ass reference, but Bob's Burgers has a character, Hawk and Chick, which is like this fake samurai monster movie thing going on here, and like that's what I was thinking of, is kind of goofy, lighthearted, kind of weird, and I was not prepared for this movie to get as dark as it did, and yeah, it got rough.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of like just straight up samurai movies that are kind of schlocky, just more about like, you know, worshiping like the blade wielding badass and not really diving into the like emotional turmoil stuff so much. In this movie, I think it's really interesting that and this is one thing I really appreciate about the movie too, is that I love when like the setup and the story for an action scene like is so good that the fight choreography almost doesn't matter. Like, you know what I mean?
I mean, you're basically saying that the action, this is very 1950s, in which that we can't have any blood shown, we can't really show the violence as it is, and like even the sword strikes are, I mean, are they sword strikes, or are they just kind of vaguely in the direction?
I don't think it's an accident that so many people in the movie use spears that they can very conveniently like plant behind the person, where, you know, the camera will make it look like they're being stuck like a pig.
It is interesting though. I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, that Kurosawa is the man who basically patented the blood spurt effect. So I'm wondering if it was a restriction of the time period or more of a limitation of the time period, because I imagine it's quite hard to show blood in black and white until you have it just fucking gushing.
Yeah, and well, part of that is I think you want a little bit of visual clarity in these kind of big battle scenes. I don't know if like censorship would have been involved or anything. I also think that like having that sort of gushing might have been wrong for the tone of this movie.
Oh no, it would have not fit in here at all. Don't misunderstand. I mean, strictly speaking, I think there is one scene where it theoretically could have worked, and this is like the origin of the blood spurt comes from a scene where two samurai are, you know, standing off with one another, and like Kurosawa is known for basically being like in any samurai fight. I believe it's Kurosawa. I could be completely fucking this up, and if I am, I'm so sorry.
I can't correct you on this one. You're flying solo.
I know. I'm going to commit to Kurosawa, but I'm going to say I might be wrong. I know it's like one of the samurai film greats, where they're basically saying, like, in any samurai fight, you should be able to tell who has already won before the battle begins. Which it's a very interesting way of going about, and you can feel it even here. And like I was kind of watching for that in the scene I'm going to be talking about, which is where I believe it's Kyozo who's about to fight another samurai, and like there's an initial fight where they clash, and it very much looks like it's a tie. But Shimada's like, no, that's not a tie. One of them has clearly won, and the other one has clearly lost. But then they continue to fight the fight anyway, and like they actually bring out blades. And sure enough, look at that, Kyozo wins. Shocker, shocker. And like in that spot, that is basically how the fight with the blood spurt works, and that like it's two gentlemen squaring off, and like one just gets got first, and that's the blood spurt there. I think in that scene it would have worked, but if that scene within the context of the rest of the movie would not have worked.
Yeah, it'd be, because that's still like a badass scene, and like this isn't all like, again, this is why I think the movie is like the perfect synthesis of like kind of heady and intellectual and kind of like, whoa, dude, sick! Because like that scene ruled, like just a general, like I just love the structure of like the fucking heist movie, like, you son of a bitch, I'm in, you know, going showing off all the individual characters, giving them their wacky stuff, and like they do this and that do that in this movie, and it's fun every time. And like especially when we're first introduced to Shimada, like when he dresses up like the monk, he gets his head shaved and like yeets the guy with his own sword, offering up rice balls. What an absolute madman.
No, it's great, and that's also how we get introduced to Kikuchiyo. Kikuchiyo. I'm sorry. Listen, I really do my best to try and pronounce things, but as you all know, I can't pronounce shit for shit. Considering I still don't know how to pronounce Thanos. Thanos, I think I said it right that time.
You got it right that time.
But I believe it's Kikuchiyo. If I'm butchering it, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, you feel free to come for me in the comments. I don't care. I deserve it. But like his introduction and his whole character development throughout the whole thing is absolutely fascinating. He's a very fun character throughout, and also will segue us into our other big point I think we want to talk about with this, which is the footballing of the audience surrogate and our point of view character, and ultimately what all of our point of view characters amount to. To me, I really noticed this with Kikuchiyo's character, in which at one point, in a really probably my favorite scene of the movie, he goes off on the samurai for looking down on peasants and explains the peasants' point of view, and it's incredibly powerful. And I was not like, it is such a sudden burst of class commentary that I was just not prepared for within this movie. That I'm just like, yeah, man, fucking tell him, let's go. And I absolutely loved it. And like that was where I kind of like first thought like, well, hang on, is he kind of supposed to be, you know, our audience surrogate, you know, the common man who has risen up the kind of hero's journey in that way? And there's some other stuff that kind of flows through. He kind of becomes a little bit more comedic and plays into basically how you'd kind of expect someone who isn't quite a samurai but isn't quite a peasant to act. And I feel like for someone watching the movie who is aware that they are neither a samurai nor a peasant at the time, it does feel very much like this is kind of accurate, you know? Especially because he gets a bloodlust that I think is very interesting because, you know, moviegoers are always there for that action scene. And I think that reflects very well in his character. I'm going to kind of let that dangle there and, much like the movie, pass the ball to Jackson to talk about another character and how these all tie in at the end.
Yeah, because I do completely agree with Sean. I noticed a lot of this stuff going on as well, and I also completely agree that one of the best scenes is when he pops off on the other samurai. Like Kikuchiyo in general, like I think he's super interesting because I think he's probably the most like unique and textured character of the crew. Like a lot of the characters, they're fun and like the acting is good and they've got some good camaraderie, but they're not like super deep. They don't have a ton of layers except for him. But the other main characters, so Katsuhiro, the youngest guy, it was interesting to me, like, noticing all the same things that Sean was, because in a lot of ways, yeah, like, that's the word I'd use, is that it passes kind of the audience POV role, like, back and forth, like a football. And I think it's notable that these two characters are also, amongst the samurai, like sort of the outsiders in some ways. Like Katsuhiro's, like a student. He's not really a full samurai. He chases around Shimada, like begging to be his teacher. I mean, he's basically Genos from One Punch Man. Like honestly, but. So Katsuhiro, I think that like it's it's a tale as old as time, as old as at least the Three Musketeers, which I haven't read that book, but I do know that there are actually 4 Musketeers, or rather there are 3 Musketeers and then a 4th one that...
The 4th one gets shot by Chevy Chase because he's invisible. That is a deep cut reference to the Three Musketeers movie with Martin Short, Chevy Chase, and I think Dan Aykroyd.
My God.
No one really remembers.
I certainly don't.
That might be one that is pretty much explicitly for my parents. How you guys doing?
You need those incredibly deep, those them glorious katana cuts sometimes.
Yeah, it was a weird comedy from like the 80s.
Oh, good. But so, like in the Three Musketeers, they have kind of like a pupil. That's like the fourth main character, and like the POV character, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a trope at least as old as that, probably older. And that's the role that Katsuhiro kind of fills. The Shimada is constantly kind of like telling him, like, no, like, you watch and observe, like, you're still young. It's presented very much as like a coming of age story for him. He's got a little like romance subplot. That's a very like audience identification like male gaze stuff and all that.
I'm sorry, it was the Three Amigos. I've been looking this up for a couple seconds here because I did fuck it up. It is kind of the Three Musketeers. It's the Three Amigos, and it's Steve Martin, not Dan Aykroyd. So there you go. There's your trivia on a 1986 American Western comedy directed by John Landis and written by Lorne Michaels, Steve Martin, and Randy Newman. I am not reading Wikipedia right now. Why do you ask?
He's reading IMDb. Thank you very much. I think it's super interesting that this role kind of gets back and forth because they both get the like they both have this energy that isn't present in the other characters who are all kind of more stoic, more wise, more like learned. And so they both Katsuhiro is, that's because he's young, he's still green. Like I think it's less about like the glory of war and more about like idolizing like the samurai as like these big masculine badass daddies basically,
which means I have to run with that really quick and just say it's kind of like idolizing the rich.
Whereas like Kikuchiyo has more of that, I'm thirsting for the glory of war like a true Saiyan, always sprinkles when he tinkles or whatever. So like both get that fantasy like kind of cut down. Kikuchiyo gets the closest thing to a heroic death in this. Who, like most characters, just kind of, even important ones, just kind of get shot. And actually, like as a side note, one of the things that I love about like the action in this movie, and like one thing that's great about like this era when it comes to action, is like how much of an oh shit big deal like the introduction of a gun is.
Oh my god, yeah. The gun was fascinating. Actually, speaking of guns really quick, do you understand how Heihachi died? He's the gentleman who died when they were burning the building.
I interpreted that as like he got cut when the other guy was struggling to try and like go find his wife.
Okay, I couldn't really figure it up. I just kind of went, okay, shrugged and moved on. But at one point, it did sound like a gunshot went off during it. So I was kind of confused in that regard, but I was just curious if you had any like more clear-cut answers for me on that one.
No, it might have been a gunshot. Because I wasn't sure either. I thought that maybe it was like an accident, like, he's swinging around his sword and they accidentally like stabbed him in the side. But I'm not sure.
Sorry, continue with your gun stuff. It was one of those things I'm like, oh yeah, guns. I don't know how this guy died. So
yeah, no, for sure. But just in general, like, that's a really like awesome underutilized way to like raise the stakes. I mean, this is a pathetic comparison, but I really love that about like Assassin's Creed 2 as well, that like most of the game is like crossbows and knives and swords and stuff, and then you get the gun upgrade. And even though it's like the shittiest gun in the world, you still feel like a giant badass for having it. So set more stuff in the past is the goal here. That particular point of like, late 16th century, like, that, anyway, or no, I was gonna say, I think I fucked that up. I think that's, I think that'd be the 14th?
Oh no, we're keeping all that in. Don't worry about that.
No, you can keep it all in.
Confused, like, floundering of like,
Oh no, I did a goof. They'll think I'm a fraud. Anyway.
I can't believe you've done this on this movie podcast that is not about history.
So, whatever fucking century it was, set more movies there. But to get back to kind of the main point, Kichio, he gets the most heroic, finger quotes, death in the movie, which is like he gets to take the last bandit with him after he gets shot. But it's less...
I'm sorry, I'm gonna just jump in again here, because does he though? Because there's one bandit that gets away that just doesn't seem to get addressed, right?
I thought that as well.
Okay, because like I was gonna say, that guy definitely just got away and does not get talked about, and I'm just like, that felt strange. But I don't know, maybe somebody got him on the back end, or maybe it kind of ties into the looseness of war, where even when you think you got them all, some might escape, and I don't know it.
It might have also just been, I didn't worry about that so much because famously, if you do want to talk about Dragon Ball Z memes, so in the scene where Cell creates the fucking Cell Juniors, and then Gohan loses his shit and kills them all, Cell creates 7 Cell Juniors, I think, and I think Gohan kills 9 or something.
Oh,
like, so that might have just been like, continuity errors and stuff happen.
It's possible. Once again, it's just another small thing that I was kind of curious about that I picked up while I was watching the movie. It's not like I'm gonna say it's a bad movie because of X. I was just like, hey, did I see something or did I just miss something?
Right. No, I mean, I was thinking the same thing. But so, we'll take Shimada at his word, and that was the last one. And like these scenes really tie into each other, and that like, so he gets to take him with him, but it's not in like a badass like Halo Reach like glorious last stand way. It's more of just like primal rage death gurgle. And even before then, like, the boisterous, hot-headed, like wacky Kikuchio, like the night before spends the whole night like mourning the other characters, the losses, where everyone else is like trying to sort of calm down. So they both get thoroughly disabused of their notions, and Katsuhiro even more explicitly when, like, this is why, like, he says, like, that was the last one, is that, like, Katsuhiro is like, where the fuck are they? Like, where are those bandits? Like, I'm gonna kill them all. Like, I'm gonna have my glorious, like, masculine war revenge. And, like, Shimada just has to come in and be like, they're gone, dude. It's over. Like, I'm sorry, but that just ain't how this works. You aren't getting your revenge.
War is hell and it's dirty and gross, baby. You don't fucking get what you want.
Yeah, right. So, like, then the end of the movie, like, I love the last scene in this movie. Those last couple shots.
Yeah, buddy.
Of the villagers, like, singing, doing the fucking whistle while you work thing, and, like, cheering, and like all the samurai just like staring at all the graves. Katsuhiro like just completely shell shocked, and Shimada's like shaking his head like, oh, we survived another one, but it's not like, oh boy, like we made it. It's like we're the ones left behind, and now this young man who shouldn't have to see this is just as broken as us.
I really like, too, that really ties into stuff going on earlier in the movie with those two gentlemen who are like, we might die on this one. Yeah, okay, let's go for it. Like, they feel very much like we are here to protect people, but we kind of want to be out of this way of life. This sucks, this way of murder and death and everything. Like, there's almost like a hopefulness in death. Like, there's a will to live, but also like I could be done and out and not have to live through this part of it because this part of it sucks to it that I really like a sad poetry to it.
Yeah, and then that thread also goes through with the grandma scene where they're like the one guy's trying to reassure and say like, oh, like she even says like, oh, this next life is gonna be just as miserable as this one. And he's like, oh, don't you worry, like, you know, there won't be any war or any strife there. And I think it's Kikuchio that's like, you don't fucking know that, dude. Shut the hell up.
It is, yeah, Kikuchio.
Like I think that this is I guess when it comes to like the glories of war, like I think that kind of having your cake and eating it too, like when it comes to presenting the horrors of war, I think that's kind of how it's got to be. You got to like bait the audience a little bit and then kind of like pull back on the choke chain and be like, you think you're going to get your cool samurai coming of age development story? Like, yoink, welcome to the adult world, motherfucker. You're a broken sad boy Ronin now.
Especially because it is like a 2.5 hour setup to get to this fight, and then the fighting is just like, it's exciting, but it's not like exciting in the way that you want it to be. It's not a pleasant excitement. It's more like oh man, this isn't good. This sucks. This is dirty. It's raining. Everyone's gross and sad and depressed, and it all sucks. This fucking blows. And it's good to watch. Don't let me like make it sound like it's a bad thing to watch. It's very effective in that way, but it's very interesting in that way as well.
Yeah, and one thing that I noticed about a lot of the kills is that like how completely like I'm like completely off guard, I feel. I'm caught by just like the mob of people with the spears. Like, there's no flashy choreography. It's just a bunch of peasants like ganking a dude on a horse and like, you know, like gutting him like over and over again. He's getting like jabbed at all sides, and I'm like, oh my god, this is like, even though there's no like blood or zoom in, like this is brutal as fuck. Like, he's just getting swarmed.
Yeah, and like even in that way, it shows no glory to it. It is purely animosity and death. There is not like a return afterwards of, yes, we did it, we killed a man. It's, we just had 16 people stab a dude 300 times.
Stuck him like a pig. Jesus.
Yeah, no, there's no resounding return to that. It just feels bad, and like everything about it feels bad in a very intentional way. It's very well done in that regard.
Oh, while we're gushing about great scenes, here's a great scene. When Kikuchio, he lets the family go to try and get the old man out of the mill or the barn, and then when the attack comes, they're all like, haha, like, fuck you, like, we got you, you weren't expecting this, were ya? And he's like, oh shit, like, they're still over there, and that house is, like, burning, and he, like, runs over, and Shimada's, like, following him, like, Kikuchio, like, keep to your post, like, what are you doing, bro? And then when they find the lady with her child, and just that everything from when she hands over the kid, just fucking, like, that was her last, like, ounce of willpower, just drops. And then Kikuchio, I keep wanting to call him Korekiyo, the fucking anthropologist from Dangan V3, which is a meme if you're familiar.
Same, and also a very different character.
Very different character. But so when he grabs the kid, he just collapses out of like emotional exhaustion. Just like, this was me all over again. Like, oh, it's so brutal. I love it.
And it really snaps into focus pretty much everything about him in just that one instance of just absolutely brutally emotional filmmaking, honestly. Like, everything about it is incredibly rough in a very primal sense and very much fills in his character without really saying much other than, this is me. and you completely understand everything, like that whole farmer to samurai thing and where it happened and like why he became a samurai, because he was, quote unquote rescued by samurai, and his own fear at this child going down the same path, a path that he clearly hates given how often he is just drunk and upset, and how he quests for glory knowing that he can't get it because he's doing it wrong and just trying anyway. It's a very Sisyphusian style of a very Sisyphusian task that resonates really well, and like, that own internal strife and struggle of the soul with like, am I doing what I am doing is right? Is this okay? Am I just chasing other people, or am I blazing my own trail? Is this glory? Is this copycat? Is this just bad? It resonates in a lot of ways. It resonates with me in a lot of ways. It's really fucking good.
Really magnificent filmmaking, I dare say.
Magnificent Seven?
There, all 7 of them. Magnificent.
All 7. And then there's the Hateful Eight and the Ridiculous Six. We can't forget about the Ridiculous Six, of course.
We cannot, if we're talking about movies clearly riffing on Seven Samurai, we cannot forget the Ridiculous Six, the greatest one of them all.
Adam Sandler's magnum opus, if we're being honest. I have a Blu-ray copy of Uncut Gems I can just go throw in the fucking trash right now. Like, fuck that movie. That's goddamn nothing compared to Ridiculous Six. What am I saying? Do we have anything else we want to say about this movie? Like, there's a lot to be said, but like, honestly, it's a lot to unpack. It's a 4-hour movie, boys.
Yeah, and I think that's the greatest, like, if nothing else, I think the takeaway here should be, don't let the length scare you. Like, there is an intermission, so if you want to watch this, like, almost like a Netflix series, then like you can pause there and pick it up again. That works perfectly fine. This movie's fucking great. It's not like it's got like, themes about like the horrors of war and stuff, but it's also pretty big and broad. So if you're just looking for some like fun, like witty action and characters, it'll have that too.
Yeah, we should talk about that for a second though too, because we mentioned a little bit that it's funny and like there's kind of some bro moments to it, but like the humor in this lands. It's never like haha funny, at least not to me. It's a lot of like kind of overt slapstick, but like you process it as humor, and like that really humanizes a lot of the characters and kind of takes them out of that dryness that I think, to go back to Star Wars, is where Star Wars Episode 1 fails, because a lot of the humor in there is not just you process it as humor, but then like your brain rejects it as humor. Like watching it again, I'm going to talk about Jar Jar for a second, just because I think this is the perfect example of it, because I don't think as an idea, like, we're gonna what I'm about to say is going to be a lot, so just bear with me for a second.
No, I'm strapped in.
We first have to strip away the inherent racism of Jar Jar, which is an ask unto itself. And then we have to kind of play around with him a little bit. But like, the idea of Jar Jar, I don't think is inherently a bad idea. It's kind of, he's almost kind of the Kikuichi of the film, in that like he's got kind of some goofiness to him, but like there's a nobleness to it. Like, he's trying to move forward with his life and find redemption in a lot of ways. I can't believe I'm carrying Kikuichi to Jar Jar Binks.
That's what we do on this show.
My life has gone off the rails, and I think I'm ready for death now, please, and whenever you're ready. But
once you're done, I can give my thesis on the similarities between Makoto Naegi and Charles Foster Kane.
Oh my god, we have such a weird niche for this podcast. So, like, as I was saying, the comedy of Star Wars, the failing of the comedy of Star Wars, I don't think is in as much with Jar Jar as a character, in as much as to how the beats, like the timing is just so wrong on all of it. Like the timing to it, maybe it's one of those things where like Lucas was taking from Japanese filmmaking and like the translation and like the timing of words to comedic action, like, just time a little bit differently. Like, this is something that I would need to, like, watch more closely on, because I was reading subtitles while I was watching this, and, like, Japanese timing, and, like, Lucas is kind of picking up on that. But, like, that doesn't translate as well to an American audience when, like, the American comedic timing, like, there's an extra, like, beat to things, or, you know, you can't just have the comedic thing happen and then immediately smash cut or wipe cut away to the next thing. Like, you need to have it, like, settle and, like, give it a minute to breathe, and there's never that breathing moment in Star Wars Episode 1. And so, like, the comedy fails pretty hard in a lot of ways, and things that are unintentionally funny become funny because that's where the comedic timing lies. Like, Anakin getting up, yelling yippee, and running away while Watto is still talking is absolutely hilarious, because yippee is so out of place. Watto is still in the middle of a sentence, and, like, it dwells on the shot for a second of Watto, like, shaking his head. Like, that's funny, but I don't think that was intentionally funny. Whereas Jar Jar will, like, do something wacky and then cut, it's gone, we're moving on, it's done, it's over, move past it. And so, like, there's never that breathing room, and I think that might be why Star Wars, like, as much as it tries to mimic the style of these movies, kind of fails in that regard, because I think if it had a little bit more comedic timing, it might actually succeed in some ways. I am spending a lot of time defending Star Wars Episode 1 this episode.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one on the. I should rewatch Phantom Menace, because I've been slowly becoming a Phantom Menace apologist the longer I live with my mom.
And see, this is also why I think 9 is so bad, because 9, like, Episode 1 has ideas in it that are actually interesting, and, like, there's some story beats, and, like, as much as it fails in a lot of ways, there's still some stuff to it. 9, like, there's a whole setup with 9. Like, I'm Rey, and, like, when they ask who she's at the end, like, just Rey. Why does she add? What does a yellow lightsaber have to do with anything? What?
I have one last thing to add to Seven Samurai before we dive into another. Maybe we need to do a full episode, like a full, like, great debate, because I would have to rewatch them, but I still think Attack of the Clones is probably the worst one. But with the humor, I think that, like, a good way to put it is that even if you're never, like, laughing out loud, I found myself, like, smiling and just kind of charmed a lot. And I think a good example is, like, and also this kind of, like, bro, like, camaraderie that works really well is when, like, the reveal that the drunk guy that the like, you know, the one like shady dude brings back is Kikuchio, who we've kind of seen before in the movie. That whole scene where he's just kind of, like, chasing around, causing a ruckus, and, you know, they're roasting him for, you know, stealing the family tree and being a 13-year-old. Like, none of that is, like, laugh out loud funny, but I had a big goofy grin on my face. I was very charmed by the whole atmosphere of it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's a very charming humor to it. It's kind of dated in a lot of ways, and I think that might be part of it too. But, like, it's hard not to be kind of charmed by the quaint, you know, 1950s Japanese humor of it all. And I mean, slapstick humor is pretty much universal. Let's all be honest with ourselves.
Right. But I have one last thought regarding George Lucas and Akira Kurosawa. So here's a question that maybe we can all dwell on for homework. It's because it truly is a chicken and egg situation. Because, like, George Lucas, I think I'm comfortable saying that he's a weird dude. He's kind of a space cadet, right? And so is it that, like, being that, like, exposing yourself to a lot of media that's not from your culture, like, does that kind of make you into a space cadet because you don't see things quite the same way that everyone else does? Or does, like, stuff from other cultures attract space cadets?
I will have to say probably the former, because, like, I think the idea of, you know, inundating yourself with other cultural information does kind of present a different spin on things, much like very much in Arrival, I believe. Like, inundating yourself with language, you kind of see the world in different language ways, just, like, given how number structures work and sentence structure works, something like that. Like, it very much restructures a lot of that idea. So I can definitely see where being inundated with other language will make you seem like a space cadet to people who have only been inundated with their own media. Like, that kind of becomes an echo chamber unto itself, but not of, like, political ideologies, but of just who you are as a person.
All right. I don't have any I kind of Not sure where I stand on this. I have to think about it, but it's something I wanted to propose. I'm happy to hear your answer.
That's my guess on it. I'm a dum-dum. I have a communications degree. I don't know if that's accurate in any way, shape, or form. That is not backed up by science. That is backed up by feeling. And I feel like I owe it to our listeners to not quote me on that. At least, like, if you want to quote me on that and then tell me I'm dumb, fine. But, like, don't quote me on that and then go tell someone else that, because I am probably wrong.
Little do they know that Beating a Dead Horse is actually a peer-reviewed academic podcast.
So first of all, we'd like to thank the Library of Cambridge for keeping us the lights on this podcast. Cambridge has no idea who we are. Let's not beat around the bush here.
Just watch. We have one fan who's like a professor at Cambridge, just some old like 60-year-old guy at like the film department who listens to us and is now very upset.
Well, listen, if you are there, we appreciate you. We love you. And you know what? I'm Sean McKinda. You can follow me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. I know I just said like an hour ago that Twitter is the bane of my existence, and it is. It 100% is. But like also, I do tweet about movies sometimes, so you should follow me there. You can also read my writing over 25yearslater site.com. I think that's all I got really going on right now.
And I'm Jackson Keller. You can find me on YouTube. I'm just Jackson Keller there. No unique like URL because I'm not big or important enough for that. But you can help by subscribing and shit. I'm also on Twitch. You can follow me there. I've not been there recently because I've been a sad boy. But I'm going to start streaming again pretty soon. So
it's always a great time. You should go hang out with him. He's a very entertaining streamer. If you want to get in contact with the podcast, though, you can follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast. We mostly tweet about updates. So like if we have to skip a week and push everything back, that's where you'll find out. It happens occasionally. It's not super often. We usually try and have like a backup of some sort. But you know what? Fucking life happens and sometimes we can't. But if you want to get in contact with us in an even better way, the best place to do that is on our Discord. And you can access that over at patreon.com/BADHcast. At only $1 a month, you get access to our Discord. $5 a month gets you access to our backlog of bonus episodes. We have a shit ton of really, really good ones and a Ni no Kuni 1 episode coming out tomorrow. I'm just going to say it. It's going to come out on Friday if this comes out on Thursday. So
bam!
Get ready for that one. And then $10 a month gets you access to everything else I said before. It also gets you access to our... It also lets you request bonus episodes if you get something that you want us to talk about. We owe you guys a second episode in May, so if you have one and you are a $10 patron, like you can be like, hey, you guys should watch another Uwe Boll movie. Make us do another one of those. I can't believe I just put that up into the world. Fuck me. You also get something else.
Thank you so much, Julia, Travis, Pat, Mom, Aunt Summer, y'all are great. Y'all are stallions.
We appreciate you so much. We also appreciate Lords of the Highway for letting us use their music, Suicide, alternate take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. They do a bunch of wonderful music stuff. You should go listen to them, check them out however you can, stream them, buy their music, all that good shit. Please support them. Also, thanks to 25yearslatersite.com. There's a little button of us in the corner you can click on. You can go check out all their stuff. They got a bunch of really talented people doing a bunch of really talented writing on a bunch of really interesting stuff. Go do that as well. Next week, we start and maybe finish Uwe Boll. We're not really sure on that one yet. We'll figure it out as it goes along, but it's going to be Until Dark. It's not it either. There's so many movies that are like dark. There's From Dusk Till Dawn, Near Dark, Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Scary stories to tell in the dark.
Yeah, whatever the Uwe Boll one is. I don't give a shit, and let's be honest, neither do you.
It's the one that's not House of the Dead.
Bye!
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go